Bible says God created the heavens and the earth and everything else. It also says He let people have dominion over every living thing that moves upon the earth. This broadly interpreted passage has led us on a perhaps unintentional but centuries-long rampage over God's creation. Is that what He really wants? The Bible also contains statements telling us to protect nature, like, "A righteous person cares for his beast." Jesus said to love your neighbor as yourself. We humans have assumed He was talking only about us, but what if we've been wrong? What if Jesus meant loving not just every person as yourself, but every living thing God created, our other neighbors? One thing a loving neighbor does not do is tear down your home to build one for himself. But that's just one example of how badly we treat our albeit beastly neighbors. But even if love thy neighbor does not apply to non-humans, there are places where people and wild animals live as neighbors, or are at least trying. Why? Are they crazy nature cultists? Mad scientists? Or do they know something the rest of our dominating and developing world does not? The state of Maine has more than 17 million acres of forest. It has around 1 million people. And nearly 30,000 moose. If moose were counted as people, they'd make up 3% of the population, enough to sway an election and qualify as an officially recognized minority group. In America, the moose is the king of beasts, the largest mammal on the continent. It can stand 7 feet tall and weigh more than 1,500 pounds. They don't see too well, but they have excellent senses of smell and hearing. In spring, they certainly don't look royal. Their brown winter coats are still changing. The females, known as cows, are giving birth, teaching their calves to eat and swim. The males, known as bulls, have lost their massive antlers over the winter. They eat 60 pounds of plants every day to grow them back. By autumn, moose are in their glory. Bulls ripple with virility. Cows are ready to mate again while still taking care of their 5-month-old offspring. Moose are big, but they're not slow. They can run 35 miles per hour and navigate their way easily through dense forest and mountainous terrain. They usually just take their time. After all, where does a 1,000-pound bull moose eat? Anywhere it wants to. Cave paintings of moose made by Native Americans thousands of years ago display their fascination and respect, as well as a spiritual relationship. The Nahmakanta tribe believed moose should be respected for their knowledge and autonomy. Iroquois believed moose brought good luck, and dreaming of one meant you would live a long life. To understand the relationship between moose and Native Americans, note the Lakota word Nagila. It means force that makes all things and beings relative to each other and their common ancestor. If this concept sounds familiar, you're right. It's in the Bible too, more than once. They have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast. The spiritual relationship between moose and Native Americans was so strong that many tribes believed moose surrendered themselves to respectful hunters on the condition that the hunters reciprocate. That meant caring for their shared habitat and resisting overhunting to ensure their mutual survival. Natives knew how tremendous a resource the moose was. Just one could feed 30 tribe members for a week and clothe them for years. They even used the hides to make boats. Their respect for moose was so great that many hunters avoided spilling a moose's blood while gutting it. They believed leaving too much blood would offend the moose's spirit and bring on a blizzard. But that enlightened way of life came to a sudden and violent end when white Europeans arrived in North America. Enlightenment meant something totally different to these folks. The Age of Enlightenment in Europe followed the breakthroughs of scientists like Isaac Newton. He and fellow enlightenees like Galileo believed that all things, including nature, were knowable and conquerable through science, and that this knowledge and power should be used to benefit the human race. Enlightenment literature like Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan angered Christian leaders. They believed that only God had this knowledge and power, and that He gave it only to the Church and monarchs like Louis XIV of France to do as they saw fit. Either way, nature was doomed. It took only 200 years for European settlers to virtually wipe out Native Americans and many animal species, including moose. The survivors became slaves, fugitives, or bizarre and tragic experiments. Finally, in the late 1800s, the massacre ended with the birth of the American conservation movement. Leaders like President Theodore Roosevelt tried to end centuries of annihilation and repair the damage. But, as this unfortunate and doctored photo exemplifies, ending the senseless destruction would prove much easier than changing America's senseless and destructive attitudes. 100 years later, the moose population in Maine has grown back from its low of 2,000. Their recovery was due primarily to state government, who banned moose hunting in 1936. But moose were also unintentionally helped by otherwise destructive environmental policies. During the ban, heavy logging made way for succulent new growth, perfect moose food. Predators were killed or driven out by farmers. When Maine lifted the hunting ban 44 years later, the herd had multiplied 200 times. But instead of going back to the old ways, a new unprecedented wave of government intervention was launched to protect what was now Maine's official state animal.
I'd say it's very important. We want to have good hunting, we want to have a lot of moose for tourists to see, and we want our forests in good condition in this area. We want to balance those three things. In addition, they wanted us to maintain a large component of mature bulls in the population, because that's obviously what everyone wants to take pictures of and what everyone wants to shoot.
But the question is, why? Why spend all that time, effort, and money to bring back an odorous, unwieldy, and arguably unattractive ungulate after you spent 200 years getting rid of them?
I think it's their majestic personality. I mean, they're not goofy or silly.
Quite often you can get within a good camera shot.
They pretty much strut around like they own the place.
Maine guides, restaurants, lodging facilities, convenience stores, lounges, whatever. I mean, people in this area all get a lift in their business because of tourism.
That's right. Most Mainers love moose, but they can see them anytime. What they really love is that other people love moose.
Yes. We've come all the way from Australia to see this moose.
I come from Germany.
We have them in New Brunswick, but you don't see them this easy.
We don't have them in Pittsburgh.
No, we don't.
It's really turned into an economic issue.
Don Hibbs runs a camp in northern Maine. His business is growing because more people make the long trip here to see moose.
When people call us, one of the most commonly asked questions is, will we see moose? And how close can we get to them? And can we see them right from our cabin? And of course the answer is an unequivocal yes. Usually it's suburbs of eastern cities. That's our main clientele, or the where they come from. And that's a sentiment that is frequently expressed to us. They want their kids to understand that the world isn't all, strip malls and blacktop.
I used to paint paintings of moose in oils and watercolors, but I just love to see them.
because they're so majestic and they're so massive and they're so gentle at the same time and they're so mysterious as they glide over all the tall shrubs and falling down logs and stuff. It's just amazing. But now I'm doing more photography. It's less stress. It's less stress because I work a full-time job, so I have to, divide my time up to different things. You got to follow your passions. I don't know. What do you want me to say? It's just, I just love moose.
Maine's economy loves the people who love moose too. With millions of dollars of merchandise and businesses bearing their likeness, the moose is the state's biggest brand, and all without multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns, book deals, or theme parks. Their star status has earned them special protections, even though they are not an endangered species. Maybe all this shows that our relationship with moose has not changed much from thousands of years ago when Native Americans glorified them on the walls of their caves. Now, moose are glorified on homes, restaurants, fences, and even pickup trucks. But what has changed is that today an animal can be extinct and still be glorified or economically exploited. How about dinosaurs? They're more popular than ever. And California's state symbol is still the golden bear, extinct since 1922. All of which also proves that just because there are images of an animal everywhere, it does not mean the real ones are easy to find.
We've been here several times and we've never seen any moose yet. It's our first time to this region because they said there was lots of moose up here.
Many people are disappointed when they make the long trip here and never see a real moose. Why do they need to see a real moose?
Yeah, we're trying to show our son what animals look like in the wild. So we've already seen a whale, humpback whale.
What'd you think of the moose?
He hasn't seen it yet, I don't think.
I haven't seen.
Go on up there with Daddy and see the moose.
Yeah. The woods are quiet and they're peaceful, but they're not really living until you see something living in them. And then when a moose comes out, and they do, you'll be looking at the shore over here, and all of a sudden, it makes the woods come alive to see the big live animal come out.
The need to see a real moose is so great that Dale Stevens started a business, taking tourists on a moose safari.
I thought about it for about 2 seconds and said, no. And but the idea kind of stuck in my little brain, and I don't know, months or years later, I said, we may not have the Red Rock Buttes of Sedona, but we've got something that Sedona doesn't have, and that's the moose.
Must have just got up. Notice how she was stretching?
Yep.
Let's go ahead and try to get out.
People come to Maine to see moose, obviously. But many of those people stay down on the coast, and that's not where you're going to find moose. Moose are more inland, and some people aren't willing to travel inland to see them. But that's what you're going to have to do if you want to see a moose. You've got to go to where they are, obviously.
And I think a lot of times the moose is misinterpreted.
For Dale, fellow guide Vicki Nolan, and their passengers, each tour is a search for connection and knowledge.
We had a young couple in an area where we typically see moose night after night here in this area. And they were standing on the edge of the road with the moose 20 feet away, lined with people taking pictures. Now this is the spring of the year. That wasn't close enough for that young couple. They passed somebody the camera and they proceeded down into the bog. They wanted their picture taken with the moose, like it was a cow in the pasture or something. And that full-grown adult bull did not like that. And he put his head down, antlers first, and he started after them. Luckily, they got up out of there soon enough. But that's a stupid thing to do, I mean, they're wild animals, and people need to respect their space.
That's always a funny experience when people ask if they can walk up to them and pet them. The other thing that comes to mind is I had a lady one day that asked, how big do the deer get before they turn into moose? And that was a comical one, and I really had to fight to keep my composure on that one. Moose are a member of the deer family, but deer will stay deer and moose will stay moose forever and always.
Dale has always loved looking for moose, but it was not a spiritual journey that led him to start his business.
And things are changing, you know, the paper companies are downsizing, and people are less apt to make their living there than they used to even just a few years ago.
Logging has long been Maine's most important industry since settlers arrived. Most of Maine's land is still owned by logging companies, but logging and its associated industries like paper are struggling. In the past few years, a number of large mills in Maine have shut down, including this one in Millinocket. Thousands of people lost their jobs, including Dale.
Years ago, it was a big industry that was here. As you say, the big paper mills dominated. They were the main employer. Everybody lived and made good money. And so now, the moose plays a very vital role in our ecotourism system here.
In a cosmic reversal of fortune, moose saved Dale.